I will say this about the subject, though, and that is that I think that the people who worry about climate change as the major trouble of Earth don't have my view. I think that I like all this shifting to renewables, but I have a different reason. I want to conserve the hydrocarbons because eventually I think we're going to use every drop, humanity, for chemical feedstocks. And so I'm in their camp, but I got a different reason.
One thing might find kind of interesting, Nebraska's not done much with wind power, and maybe 2 miles from where we're sitting, right across the river, people are buying their electricity cheaper in Council Bluffs, right across the river, than they are in Omaha. And yet Nebraska is entirely a public power state. So there's no stockholders who have to have any earnings. The bonds are issued on a tax-exempt basis, and yet electricity is considerably cheaper right across the river. And the wind blowing doesn't just start at the Missouri River. I mean, it comes across Nebraska, and that wind could be captured. And so far, it really hasn't. And the real irony is that because our electricity is so much cheaper in Iowa, you have these massive server farms of people like Google. I mean, it's become a tech haven for these operations that just gobble up electricity. And Iowa has gotten plant after plant after plant and job after job after job, and increased property tax. I mean, gotten more property tax revenues. And that's being done. The Google server is probably 7 or 8 miles from here. And it's located in Iowa because we have cheap wind-generated electricity, and it's creating jobs. It's fascinating, but Nebraska has prided itself on public power. It was originated back, I believe, in the 30s when George Norris was a very powerful senator here, and it's been a source of pride, but lately it's been a source of cost too. Okay, shareholder section 3.
Good morning, Mr. Buffett and Mr. Munger. My name's Adam Bergman. I'm with Sterling Capital in Virginia Beach. In your 2008 shareholder letter, you said, derivatives are dangerous. They have made it almost impossible for investors to understand and analyze our largest commercial banks and investment banks. So my question for you is, how do you analyze and value companies like Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and other commercial banks that Berkshire has investments in relative to their significant derivative exposures? Thanks.
Yeah, derivatives do complicate the problem very dramatically. Now they are moving away to being collateralized, which helps. But there's no question that if you ask me to describe the derivative position of the B of A, for example, I would know that they have done a conscientious job and worked hard at properly evaluating. But the great danger in derivatives is if there's a discontinuity. If there's not discontinuities, you probably don't have much of a problem, assuming they get marked to market and collateralized and so on. But if the system stops for a while, the system stopped after 9/11 for 3 or 4 days. It stopped at the time of World War I. They closed the New York Stock Exchange for many months. They debated closing the stock exchange very seriously the day after October 19th, 1987. And there were a lot of people that wanted to close it, but and on that Tuesday morning, it looked like it was about to stop, but it continued. But if you have a major cyber, nuclear, chemical, biological attack on the country, which will certainly happen at some point, if you have a major discontinuity, then you'll have a lot of problems, But you will also, when things reopen, you will find there can be enormous gaps in things that you thought were fully protected by collateral and that sort of thing, or netting arrangements and that type of thing. So I regard very large derivative positions as dangerous. We inherited a modest-sized position at Gen Re, and in a benign market, we lost about $400 million just in trying to unwind it with no pressure on us whatsoever. So I do think it continues to be a danger to the system.
By the way, the accountants blessed that big derivative position as being worth a lot of money. They were only off, what, many hundreds of millions.
Yeah, well, Charlie found one position when he was on the audit committee at Solomon. I think it was mismarked by $20 million. And I actually, by happenstance, I do know of one incredibly mismarked position. Doesn't affect any of our operations, but it almost staggers the mind to know the way that position is marked, and you can only come to the conclusion that some trader somehow got influenced whoever did mark it, or marked it himself, heaven forbid, and probably just influenced someone, or they didn't know enough. Some of these things get so complicated, they are very hard to evaluate. That's the kind that have the most profit in them usually, so they were quite enthusiastic about those when we were at Solomon. They can be extraordinarily hard to mark, and like I say, I know one that's so mismarked it would blow your mind. And the auditors, I don't think are necessarily capable of holding that behavior in check. It's very interesting because now there's really 4 big auditing firms, and obviously they're auditing companies where there's a derivative position, and they're auditing company A that's on one side of the transaction, and they're auditing company B that's on the other side of the transaction. In some cases, it's the same auditor. And I will guarantee you that there's plenty of times when the marks on what they're attesting to are significantly different, which would be an interesting exercise to pursue in terms of checking those numbers out. Derivatives are still dangerous in large quantities, and we would not do them on a collateralized basis, because if there was a discontinuity, I don't know exactly where we would end up, and I'm never going to get us in a position where we could have money demanded of us and not be able to fulfill it with ease and with me sleeping well. So we won't engage in it. We've got some in runoff that so far we've made money and had the use of money for a decade or more. I mean, it's been very attractive for us, but that does not entice me at all into doing any derivative transactions that would involve collateral, and collateral is not required. It's still a potential a time bomb in the system. Anything where discontinuities, and basically that means closing up, stopping trading markets from functioning. Anything where discontinuities can exist can be real poison in markets. Kuwait, some years ago, went to a very delayed system on settlement of stock purchases, so that you didn't have to settle up for 6 months or thereabouts. And it caused all kinds of problems because you've got an IOU from somebody for 6 months, and if you got zillions of those, a lot of trouble can ensue. So I agree with your general caution. I'm not in the least troubled by our Bank of America investment, nor our Wells Fargo. We added to Wells Fargo, and our Bank of America position right now is a preferred stock, but we're very likely to exercise the warrants on that. On the other hand, there are a great number of banks in the world. If you take the 50 largest banks in the world, we wouldn't even think about probably 45 of them. Wouldn't you say that, Charlie?
Well, we're in the awkward position where I think we'll probably make about $20 billion out of derivatives and just those few contracts that you and Ajit did years ago. All that said, we're different from the banks. We would really prefer it if those derivatives had been illegal for us to buy. It would have been better for our country.